What if all traces of humanity outside of the islands disappear? And this is clearly a few years after because the islands are now recolonizing the continents. Taiwan finally taking back their rightful land. Wait, including Korea? Or maybe they don't, but they do claim a lot of other countries. Our territorial claims by Taiwan, or what is known as the Republic of China, dates back to over 100 years ago. They had a lot, but not the Korean Peninsula at that point. Throughout other points in Chinese history, they did. Anyways, the Japanese are also racing to recolonize Korea. Okay, let's not have them do that again, though. This is such an interesting map because obviously certain islands in the world have way more population than others. The United States is already back, and they're looking kind of like a very weak 13 colonies. Was the island that didn't get Thanos snapped in this universe Long Island? With some of these islands, I'm questioning if they'd even have enough population to start recolonizing. I guess 500,000 is probably enough. I underestimated you, Newfoundland. But there's definitely only like 12 people that live in this part of Canada. I feel like the British would just start recolonizing everything again. Greece also might go Alexander the Great, but I doubt we'll see a Roman Empire because they only are really working with Sicily. It's gonna take them a minute to even unify the Italian peninsula again. Is this a civil war in Madagascar? And I'm trying to figure out exactly how Hindustani settlements have gotten already this far. This Indonesian island of Java would probably have one of the most populations in the entire world. Oh yeah, it's actually not even close. They have 153 million. That's 50 more than Japan. The big island, that is. A lot of really cool lore. I enjoyed this. Instantaneously, the British and Japanese would probably become the most powerful. What if Europe was Muslim and North Africa was Christian? Talk about an Uno reverse. We have the Umayyad here in modern day Germany and a new sultanate in West France. Well, this is just the Iberian Peninsula if there was never a Reconquista. I guess in this universe, they did expect the Spanish Inquisition. Meanwhile, in Africa, we've got the Christian Empire of Egypt, also the Kingdom of Africa in modern day Tunis and parts of Algeria, and finally a Christian Morocco. Oh, and the Christians have made it across the strait and they are going into Spain. So is there going to be like an opposite I don't know, my brain can't handle this. I like how there are still Catholics in the British Isles, and I'm not sure if they're like reconquering Scotland and Wales. Or maybe they are the ones still being conquered. Technically, this is the year 1215 AD. Nestorianism? What is that? They thought Jesus was really two separate persons, only the human Jesus was in Mary's womb. Okay, well, they're in Crimea and then parts of the Caucasus mountain range. And one of the more interesting parts about this map are the different denominations that have formed out of Islam. Like, this world's not just divided between Sunni and Shia. There's a whole lot more going on. Very nice lore. I want to know what's going on with the rest of Africa now. What if the US state of Utah was Jewish? Which I guess in this universe is called Utah. Oh my god. It also weirdly has a slightly different shape. They decided to split this land with Wyoming over here. Now, Utah is obviously the home of the Latter-day Saints, but who's to say they wouldn't just maybe all be Jewish instead? Like the proposed San Francisco rail line and the Hebrew names over here in the state. Did you circumcise Wyoming? Well, I guess this is where we are now. What if China had an absolutely comical amount of Hong Kongs? Well, Hong Kong or Macau's. Remember, those are two very small territories in the south of China. One was formerly British, the other one Portuguese. In 1841, China ceded the island to the British, the end of the First Opium War. So basically that's gonna happen again, just with everyone around the world. But fast forward to the year 1990. So China now borders Austria, France, India, Greece, Argentina. There's still the British Hong Kong, as well as I mentioned earlier, the Portuguese Republic. There's South Africa over here, Egypt, Canada, Australia, Sweden, Brazil, Belgium, Mexico, Thailand, Yugoslavia. Because why not? Germany, the US, Italy, Japan. Okay, how did Japan get all that? That's not even coastal. What did they do to do that? Denmark, Bulgaria, Turkey, Romania, the Netherlands. Oh my goodness, it doesn't stop. Even the Soviet Union, Norway, Spain. Okay, I have to admit, this is definitely a comical amount. I like how Kashmir is still disputed. I love this. China and all of her neighbors. So instead of in our universe bordering, I think it's 14 different countries, they probably border something like 30. Something about the idea of China being neighbors with Bulgaria. A socialist Bulgaria, I might add. This is a very specific year. This is before the collapse of the Iron Curtain, or even Yugoslavia. I guess I should have used a different word than the Iron Curtain. Technically, that started to fall with the unification of Germany. You can't march on Hong Kong if there's 20 of them. And technically, this isn't that far-fetched, since the European powers did plan to carve up this nation. I mean, some of the tinier places in Europe having their own Hong Kong, that's a little extreme, but yeah, this definitely would have have been pretty fun. Better dead than red, or what if all the US and their allies disappeared? So Thanos snapped, just capitalism. He did always seem like a communist to me. So literally all of the population of the US and her allies did die, which makes that slogan funny, better dead than red. Okay, we're gonna see. So they all just vanished in the year 1980, but this map is taking place in 2010. So Western Europe is all gone, since at that point they were all part of NATO, including Greece and Turkey, which Turkey's just been completely integrated into the USSR. An interesting thing to note here is that the Soviet-Sino split still occurred, so there actually might be a second Cold War just between communist nations right now. India was pretty independent during the Cold War, and obviously the biggest thing is that there's pretty much no one in the Americas. Well, except for Cuba. Cuba infamously was the only communist place over here. So Cuba's basically become like an island republic, and the Soviets have already begun to colonize the 13 colonies in a way. Also, they got back Alaska. Not surprised to see California in here, but this seems to be a California that was maybe colonized by the communist Japanese, who were probably set up there by the Chinese. This is definitely a unified Korean peninsula under the north, and I don't even know who extended down this way because these were mostly capitalist nations. Indonesia was a part of the West. I guess technically it could be Vietnam. Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, all communist. Remember, there was a huge non-aligned movement during the Cold War, so a lot of places in Africa didn't disappear. The United Nations was dissolved in 1985, and actually border conflicts between the Soviet Union and China ended in 1995. So there is no technical Cold War, but there are three major powers in this world. This is just like, so this world is led by three major powers. Of course, the Soviet Union, Maoism from China, and then India, who was obviously independent, like I said, and a part of the non-aligned movement. I think the vast majority of power here would still be led by the Soviets. And they pretty much control all of Europe, and they're gonna get to North America very soon. I'd definitely like to see what the world map looked like in another 50 years. 25 years after the death of Genghis Khan, and the Mongol Empire still stands. Because remember, after his death, his empire was pretty much doomed. It was just gonna completely splinter like so many other past empires. However, in this universe, Genghis's son did a whole lot better. Well, he also just lived a whole lot longer. That's really the key. He's basically gonna live a whole 20 more years in this universe, which means his empire won't fracture. So it appears as though the Mongolians have literally puppeted the Holy Roman Empire, also quite possibly the Eastern Romans as well. Of course, we all know the Mongolians never figured out the whole boat thing, so the Greek islands are still safe somewhat, and that I think guarantees the safety also of the Kingdom of England at this time. But even huge parts of France are under invasion too. The last land left is pretty much just Iberia and the westernmost parts of Africa. Remember that in reality, the Mongolian Empire really just got to the outer edges of Poland. Obviously, they got way further in this universe. I can't wait for the Mongol Emperor to convert to Christianity and be elected the Holy Roman Emperor. Is this a world where just Mongolia officially becomes the new Rome? What if the United States of America was organized way better? And by that, I think they mean less straight lines. Oh no, there still are several straight lines, but there are a little bit less at the same time. Even as a Californian myself, I have to admit our state should not be that big. So yes, the Golden State being broken down into a couple other states, it does just make a whole lot more sense. I'm sorry. This is definitely an interesting way to divide it though, with San Diego, Los Angeles, and then you have Monterey doing their own thing, San Francisco. Jefferson has always been a proposed state up here too. Oregon's a bit smaller, and so is Washington, but it does make sense more like culturally. Like just give them all the coast stuff. Meanwhile, there's Lincoln. We don't have a weird looking Idaho. Actually, Idaho doesn't even exist. This is just the Shoshone state, which is kind of cool with Boise. Nevada stretches all the way up from Las Vegas, and where they're getting parts of modern day Oregon. There's a big old thick Utah as well as Arizona. New Mexico getting El Paso just makes a lot more sense, I have to admit. Now, the Texans probably won't be saying the same thing I said about California, but they've also been broken up, even though, yeah, Texas is such a huge state, you really could divide it a lot better. Oh, no Panhandle from Oklahoma anymore. Might as well get rid of Alabama's coastline, give it all to West Florida. And this is another state. There's Florida, but then there's also, oh, there's like 3 different Floridas now. Oh God, one was enough. And it looks like the East Coast has been made a little bit bigger. Like some of the states aren't as small. Well, maybe it's kind of hard to read. New Sweden, that still exists? That's kind of like an old throwback. No, there still are some really small states here, but you know, there's also been some merging going on. It's funny, I think we can all agree that we probably should reorganize the states like this. Like history and culture has a big reason why we look the way we do, but the states will never get reorganized in a million years just for political reasons as well. Also, why? Why would they do this? But it is interesting to think about. So notice that Maryland Mariana has officially become a state, and so did Puerto Rico. Wait, is there still 50 states technically? I don't know if I want to sit here and count all the states. I hope he still kept the four corners point. He did, somehow. This is definitely one of the better United States maps reorganized I've seen. There's so many ways to do it. A map of North America in the year 1920, and some very bad things have happened to the United States, and apparently to Canada as well. Canada's been very divided. I believe this is still British territory. They got Alaska. Also, the federal government, I think, lost the Civil War. We now have the Dominion of Carolina. Is Florida under Spanish control, or did they get their independence from Spain? I think the latter. Mexico still lost their former territory in California and Nevada, but they kept Texas and Nueva Mexico. And Central America is still doing Central American things. Oh, but we got a big El Salvador. As apparently several southern states remained loyal to the British during the American Revolution. Also, this is technically a British colony. I should have seen that with the word Dominion. Also, the US is just way weaker. Like, maybe we expanded and got California, but we weren't able to beat back Mexico as much as we did in reality. Also, did Florida also become part of the British Empire? In this world, I wonder if the US even helps Britain. We're probably pretty big rivals, because, I mean, we're being crunched down on both sides. I don't think we'd be fans during World War II, but I don't know. Like how the big city here in California is San Pedro. I never would have guessed that. Very interesting timeline. I don't think I've ever seen this continent divided like that. And big thanks to my patrons this month.
Drew, je suis ton père de retour avec le lait, regarde dehors.
DOOCHBAGGINS,
Amateur Archaeology,
Carmel
Connor,
Ich kann ohne Drecksstimme nicht schlafen.
Fredrik Tibblin, Henrik Hedlund,
InquisitorXarius,
DaBeautiful-MEGAN-Underwood, JohnDenver, KirinoIsBestGirl,
KansasWasMentioned,
The Mexicans,
and ZaneyBoi.